Breaking Up with Addiction is proudly supported by experts you can trust. Kindbridge Behavioral Health, safe, non-judgmental counseling just a tap away. Welcome to Breaking Up with Addiction. I'm Corinne Wright, certified recovery and executive coach.
And I'm Gwendolyn Boyd McGee, licensed clinical professional counselor. So welcome to today's show. Our topic is winning, losing, and gambling, the hidden costs of sports culture. But before we dive into that, I'd like to review our homework assignment. I hope that all of our listeners were able to get it done. We asked you to identify 3 coping skills or strategies that you can utilize to help you to deal with urges and avoid relapses. So today's trivia question is, what is the average age that a woman develops a gambling disorder? Do you have any guesses, Corinne?
That's a good question, Gwen. I'm going to guess between the ages of maybe 35 to 50.
Okay, you got it, but I'll give you something more exact later.
Okay, great. It'll be fun to unpack that. In this episode, we examine how intense pressure to succeed can take a significant emotional and mental toll. We'll explore how gambling often becomes a coping strategy in the high-stakes environment of sports. You'll hear firsthand how gambling is normalized in sports culture and the critical role it plays in the lives of athletes. Gwen, I have a question for you.
Okay.
And this is just you and I talking. When we think about sports culture, we think about football players, basketball players, just anyone in sports, tennis, and considering the weight of things that come on these athletes in addition to normal day-to-day life. And when I say weight, I'm specifically referring to, if you could imagine a 50-pound black, circle weight on your back that is called winning. Winning. When you hear the weight of winning in athletes, what does that bring up to you when you think about sports culture and the mindset of an athlete?
I know that it can be extremely overwhelming, and the pressure, the competition, just the pressure of winning. You got to win, 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 right? You can't lose. You got to do whatever you got to do. If that means spending a lot of time working out and exercising.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of pressure. It really is. And so for those athletes who are not mentally healthy, that's when certain, things tend to happen, like them utilizing unhealthy coping skills or strategies.
That is such a good explanation, because it really is the part where you said if they're not mentally healthy. And that's something that we have to remember, is that our mental health and the status of it makes a huge difference when you add layers of things that bring on perfectionism, the attitude or idea of winning at all costs, from youth sports to professional league athletes and beyond. You have to consider the age range that this impacts. It's not just adult athletes. You have kids that are also impacted by this. And, there's a lot of conversations not happening surrounding how pressure impacts youth. We're going to talk a little bit about anxiety and depression and burnout and a few other things today, but not to keep you waiting. We don't want to keep you waiting. And now that it is, we're in April, and I'm going to pass the torch to Gwen as she takes us into the next segment, which we are both excited about today.
In honor of National Minority Health Awareness for the month of April, I am super excited to introduce you to our guest. His name is Jerry Bobo Mason. He was born and raised in Lamesa, Texas. He's the second-born son of 4 children to Jerry and Velma Mason. So, author has actually written 3 books as well. He talks about his true life story starting from the age of 4. He reveals to his audience, while at 4, suffering from severe back pain, that through the pain and agony as a child, the thought of not being able to play sports kept Jerry going. So trauma struck Jerry again at age 13. This tragedy coupled with the pain he had been experiencing in his back, would cause Jerry physical, mental, and emotional damage that would alter the rest of his decision making and life. But because of his passion for sports, mainly basketball, Jerry decided to move forward with both traumatic injuries in hopes of achieving his dreams. He's received great recognition and numerous awards during high school, including becoming a first team All American, all despite his physical and mental challenges. So I know Jerry on a more personal basis because I met him when I was attending Texas Tech many years ago. We won't say how many years, but it was a while ago. And so I just remember him being a really awesome basketball player, a really good guy, and someone who is always willing to help someone else. So, Jerry, we are just so happy that you're here with us today. I'd like to ask you, first of all, about your books. You've written 3 books. And from other authors that I've talked to, they all say it's difficult. It's almost like having 3 different children. And it's hard to sometimes determine which book is your favorite or which one maybe you had the best experience when writing. So that's my first question for you. Which one of your books maybe is your favorite?
Well, first I want to say thank you, Gwen, for that. That was beautiful, and it's also very wonderful to hear your voice again. And I also I thought you were a wonderful person as well. Well, I wrote Coach, the Mediator of Dreams and Destroyer of Generations first, but I was only 4 years old, the psyche of a broken soul. It's not my favorite, but it's the one that I had to expose and be more vulnerable about, the reality of why Coach meant so much, so important to me. And so when I wrote Coach, a lot of people said you were All-American and you had a chance to play college basketball. Why are you so upset, or why are you so hurt, or why is the pain still there? So, 4 years old is my why. It's my why Coach was so important, why the title, The Mediator of Dreams and Destroyer of Generations, was so important to me. So I think all 3 of them have a very, very important impact on my soul. But 4 years old, The Psyche of a Broken Soul is probably the one that I had to be more vulnerable and exposed the majority of my pain with.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I think Corinne has a question that she would like to ask.
I wanted to hear a little bit more about kind of your why behind that book, because I would love to know, hearing about your injuries is something that I know a lot of people are dealing with out there, especially if they are in sports too. Injuries will come. But can you talk to us about the pressure you might have felt as a young athlete and how that may have affected you mentally and emotionally that drove you to writing that book?
Well, just growing up in a small town, Lamesa, basketball was tradition. I think the tradition itself was pressure, just want to be a part of that tradition that you had seen as a kid. When I was 4 years old, I just remember the age 4 years old because I talked to my mom about the pain, and she mentioned, that I was only 4 years old, that I really didn't know what real pain was. I didn't, so that was my reference to 4 years old when she said that. And so I didn't know exactly what was wrong with my back. I just knew it hurt. And I just went along with what she said because I was just a baby. But, once I broke my foot in 7th grade, and just realizing that I wouldn't get a chance to be a part of that tradition, the pressure of just being a regular person, not being able to play basketball, football, baseball, compete in the community with all the kids, or somebody think I was handicapped. Because mentally I was handicapped because of my fear of the pain, but just not being able to be a part of, what everybody else was doing, to have a chance to, run out of that tunnel and play for my high school. Yeah, it was pressure for me to maybe not be as, my injuries, not just harp on how bad they were, because I really didn't want to be fixed. I wanted to play. And so if I was to be fixed, then I probably would miss basketball, miss baseball, football. So even though I was a kid and I was hurting, that pressure just wanted to be a part of the community, be a part of the team, and be somebody important. It just stopped me from really pursuing, letting people know more about my injuries.
So you were kind of masking your injuries to fit in.
Yeah, 100% masking, and so when I talked to my mom, both times when I broke my foot, and poverty is a human in my eyes. Poverty causes people to be immune to or be blind to a lot of things. I was blind to it at that age, so I just just when I told my mom about my foot, and she said to soak it, and I told her, well, I didn't feel like it was a soak kind of injury, but for her and the way we grew up, I'm sure she didn't think at the time I had fractured my foot or had an inverted arch. She just said soak it, and so I felt like, with what I talked about at 4 years old, and then when I told her that this was going to be my reality anyway, I had to deal with it. And so I had to mask it. Kids can be cruel. I remember kids saying, hey, you shoe look like it's on the wrong foot. So, kids can be cruel as well. So I masked it for a lot of reasons. But the main reason was, there was no way it's going to be fixed. We probably couldn't afford it. And I wanted to play sports. So there was a lot of reasons I did what I did. But the majority of it was to be a sports athlete.
Right. So Jerry, I'd like to kind of pivot a little bit and ask you a question about, growing up in that environment, being in a minority. How do you think those kind of pressures could lead to like unhealthy coping, like, including potential gambling or other addictive behaviors among athletes?
Yeah. Well, I think you grew up in a small town, but I think growing up in La Mesa, in that area, such diverse towns, and when you're really good at sports, I don't think you're the minority. Actually, you're kind of the majority. So we really didn't know a lot about racism or stuff like that back then. But I think the culture of winning, the culture of competing, I think the culture of poverty, and when you get a chance to be exposed to gambling, those are things or traits that really causes gamblers to become bigger gamblers, hating to lose, loving to win. The competitive nature is if I lose, I want to get my money back. The fact that if I could make a bet and pay my rent, I think, for me, maybe in a bigger town, as I've coached in bigger towns, I've seen where being a minority could be a deficiency. But when I came up, there was such diversity. I don't think it added much to that, but I think more just the winning, the competition, the tradition, just the passion of winning. And I think we gamble every day. I put all my eggs in a basket when I gambled, when deciding not to have the surgeries. It was a gamble. So I think every day when we make decisions, it's a gamble. So I think gambling is really a part of us. We just don't know it.
Right. You make a really good point. So, yeah, gambling is a part of life because when you make a decision, you're not sure. It's a risk. You're uncertain about the outcome. But
Right.
I'd like to ask you more specifically. Like, I know that, being in La Mesa was a different experience for you. But once you went to Texas Tech, that probably was a huge culture change for you.
Well, I mean, I was an All-American, so I had a chance to visit Seton Hall, which was in New Jersey, Wyoming. I had a chance to visit really big cities, bigger states. I had a chance to see more. So just, being from La Mesa, about 80 miles from Lubbock, I had experiences with Texas Tech. And so the basketball allowed me to be on a bigger stage earlier in life, maybe than most people. So when I went to Tech, it wasn't my first choice. It wasn't where my heart was. It was part of why I wrote Coach the Mediator of Dreams and Destroyer of Generations. It was a situation with my dad and something he felt was better, for me, a better place for me, which I had chosen another college. But then you meet people like yourself and you look at the beauty within the opportunity and say, Tech turned out to be great. But yeah, that whole culture of sports and just the opportunity to be around that stuff. And I didn't know there was a lot of gambling going on back then on sports, but it's been going on for years. So I think the bigger the university, the bigger the opportunity is to bet and gamble.
Being that you are a coach and you live in sports culture, can you share with us how you see gambling showing up in your world?
But I just it's accessible, the accessibility of it, the freedom of it. Now you see NBA, all the pro, they're advertising it, but just being able to have the freedom to do it without it affecting your career, and, me as a basketball player, as a coach, my brothers, our peers, we gamble on games sometimes. We have gambled and it's just out of fun for us because we know we can afford to lose and not lose, but because we hate losing, when you lose, you say, well, I don't get this $20 back. But sometimes I think when people, they bet in their houses and they bet in mortgages, and I've never gotten to that extreme, but I know this very accessible. And I think the pro sports have made it accessible because it was an epidemic. And once they seen that they can't beat them, they've joined it and made it even more of a bigger epidemic. It's just the freedom to do it without, it affecting your job, but more your household than that. So it's just that addictive thing of winning and competition and thinking you know sports and thinking you can pick the right one. It starts out as fun, but then a lot of time it escalates into more than that.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I would like to ask you just one other question since, we did bring you on for the month of April in honor of the National Minority Health Awareness Month. Jerry, do you feel like there's enough attention given to in mainstream sports for minorities?
As far as gambling or just per
Yes,
se?
as far as gambling, do you feel
Yeah, I
like?
mean, I'm sorry.
No worries. I was just going to remind our listeners that, Blacks or African Americans are affected by a gambling disorder at double the percentage rate of any other race. So, I mean, where there's more problems, shouldn't there be more like solutions and more treatment opportunities?
For me, just my assumption and my, just watching overall and being a part of it, I think as a black man, as a minority, just the things that I've been through individually for the opportunities for me to win a bet, what it meant to me, maybe to pay a note or to pay a car note or, even that. But once you lose, like I said, then that being an athlete, that competitive nature comes in. Like I can't afford to lose. Then it becomes a game that really costs a lot of people. I think they really mask it by making it accessible to every, I don't think it just made accessible to so with the NBA and the major football and everybody's doing the DraftKings. And so they make it accessible for everybody. That's why I said it's an epidemic. I think, maybe the factors that a lot of minorities have going on, the poverty, a lot of sports related minority people, betting is the prime appetizer for people of that magnitude, poverty, competitive, just liking to win, hating to lose. Gambling
Right.
it'll lure you in real quick.
Right. So,
No.
so were you aware before coming on to our program that that gambling disorder does affect, minorities or blacks in particular at a much higher rate?
I wasn't aware at all. I can see how, and I can understand 100% why, but I never thought about it from that aspect, but I could definitely see how. And I think when they put that disclaimer, and they give you this 1-800-GAMBLERS Anonymous, I think they cover themselves with that, knowing that, me as a black man, if I had a problem, addiction is addiction, whether it's drugs or alcohol. The first thing is admitting that you are an addict. And so many people, once they admit they're addict, then they become weak. And then that mentality of being an athlete or somebody thinking I'm weak, me having a broken foot or a cracked vertebrae and somebody thinking I'm weak, that mentality, I can't have anybody thinking I'm weak. I'm not going to call 1-800-ANONYMOUS. So I can see where it could be really prevalent in the black community or in the minority
Right.
community.
Right. Yeah. Because of the stigma. I mean,
Yes,
them
ma'am.
not really wanting people to find out that they're dealing with this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for being our guest today. Everything you've said was very insightful. Thank you for bringing your real world experience. And before you go, can you just tell us a little bit about how you help athletes as a coach to balance things like their emotions or the demands of sports? How do you work with the youth you work with?
Well, thank y'all for having me, and I really enjoyed being on the show. Just my real life experiences, especially as a coach, the things I've been through. And that's one thing in writing the books. I wanted them to be more helpful than as medicine for me. So I use my real life experiences, and I always talk to my kids about, my journey and how important sports was to me and how mentally without them it would affect me. But also knowing how much I invested in it and didn't get out the return that I wanted, how it caused me a lot of trauma and how it caused me a lot of withdrawals. And so it's a very thin line with sports. You just have to make them be aware that it's a possibility, that it might not end up good, and you have to make sure that you understand how to navigate your journey and your purpose within your journey, and also be surrounded by people that understand that there are consequences, good or bad, that are results of loving sports and playing sports, and it's a real mental thing. Sports and coaching is mental, and it's all mental. And every day thinking and running plays and remembering plays and travel, it's so mental and it's fatiguing, and it has ability to really be something that can cause trauma if you don't navigate it right.
What age group do you work with, Jerry?
I do high school, and so I do varsity boys, but I also do I'm over the whole program. So you really start talking about it in seventh grade. That's when I have access to the kids. So I really start talking about the importance of understanding your why and your importance of why you plan the sport. What do you want out of it? And it's my job to help them navigate their why, because I've been there, and just give them both sides of it, the good and the bad, the possibilities. I'm not God. Only God knows what's going to come from the journey, but to let them know that, if he has something for you, that I have to prepare you for that. And that's my job as a coach, to prepare them for what God wants for them.
Amen, Jerry.
Awesome response.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
And now I'd like to talk about minorities and socioeconomic status and how this relates to gambling. So, Corinne, socioeconomic status, it's not all about the income, right? There are other things that need to be taken into consideration.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like how much education and really what kind of barriers are in these communities that make it difficult for these people to even think about pursuing higher education, especially now with all the news about student loans and, all the controversy and lawsuits and whatnot. I bet these individuals are really hesitant about, pursuing student loans to try to get education. And we know a lot of times in these communities, this is what a lot of the youth, this is what encompasses their goals. Get a good education, get out of this neighborhood, move to a better neighborhood, make more money, a change of socioeconomic status.
And Gwen, hearing you say that just sounds like pressure. When you think about get a job, get a good job, move out of this neighborhood, do this, it sounds like almost like an invisible pressure that, we need to raise our awareness on what are youth thinking when this is what they're, taught they must do.
Right. And let's also look at the financial security. Or is there even really a thing with a lot of these people? Because they may be living like paycheck to paycheck, barely getting by. True. People looking down on them, maybe stigmatizing them. So many obstacles, Corinne.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even so, poverty is not a single factor. But I think it's really characterized by, multiple physical and maybe some other like psychosocial stressors, that are just different in these kinds of marginalized communities. So we know that the socioeconomic status, it affects like pretty much the overall human functioning, because all of your goals, everything that you want to do, the barriers, right? Yeah. Minimal protective factors, all of this encompasses, and kind of makes up what the person's socioeconomic status is. So we've talked about how, educational achievement, how it's difficult in these communities. But what about the physical health?
I think that's something that gets overlooked.
But it shouldn't, right? Because a person needs to be physically and mentally healthy in order to be productive and do the things that they want to do to pursue their goals, right?
Right.
So, okay, imagine a person who is a hard worker, working full time, but has a job that doesn't offer benefits. So most of the time, this person will probably treat themselves with over-counter meds from home, right?
Yeah, patching it up, doing what they can.
Probably won't have time or maybe can't get off of work to even schedule an annual wellness exam, right?
If they're not getting paid for that time off, they're probably not going to choose to take that time off.
Right, because, they don't have the money. Because remember, they're living paycheck to paycheck. No medical insurance. Now, it is a little better since the Affordable Care Act. But, Corinne, there are still people who can't even afford the monthly payment for the Affordable Care Act. to even get the insurance.
That is
and
very
I
true.
also want to point out that this relationship between socioeconomic status, race, and ethnicity, it is intertwined. Because there was a U.S. Census Bureau research study that indicated, that actually showed that race and ethnicity in terms of like classification often determine a person's socioeconomic status.
Look at that.
Right, right. And they went on to further discuss that these communities are often segregated by socioeconomic status, race, and ethnicity. So a lot of these communities share common characteristics. It's usually the low economic status, right? Poor health conditions, low levels of education attainment. I mean, all of these things are things that have been plaguing the marginalized minority communities.
You know what, Gwen? According to Mueller and Hildebrandt, a 2017 study shows that those most impacted by gambling addiction include minorities, low-income individuals, and those in high-pressure environments. And you're describing exactly that. And, you know, these would be the people at greater risk, and these would be the people with limited access to resources, both cultural, stigma around seeking help, and financial pressures. You know, I love that you're laying this out for us to be able to kind of see the who, you know, here.
Right. And so now I want to kind of look at some statistics. You know, I love my statistics. Let's look at the area of discrimination and marginalization. Okay. So in regards to this, in the U.S., 39% of African American or Black children and adolescents and 33% of Latino children and adolescents are living in poverty. They are living in poverty more than double their counterparts, like the non-Latino, white, and Asian children. Yeah.
That's a healthy number there. That's number's rich.
I mean, it's right there at 40%. I mean, and that is a lot. So also, minority racial groups are more likely to experience poverty, right? I mean, as a whole,
exactly.
in general. So Black men working full-time earn only 72% of the average earnings of comparable Caucasian men and 85% of the earnings of Caucasian women.
Which speaks to some of the numbers that show that Black men are at higher risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, got to make some money, you know, gambling on the side. That's my extra job.
Right.
Yeah, until you start getting into so much debt and you realize that gambling is not a real good, feasible part-time job. Yeah. So I'd like to move and look at some statistics on education. So as far as education is concerned, Black and Latinos are more likely to attend high poverty schools than Asian Americans and Caucasians. And in addition to this, Corinne, in these neighborhoods where there's low socioeconomic status, some of these schools are not able to get maybe the resources and maybe the staff, the teachers, you know, that can really like give them the kind of education that they need, you know, to actually pursue higher education. So it shows that this status in these communities may actually deprive students of all of these resources. And high-achieving Black students may be exposed to like less rigorous curriculum, and which means that their counterparts, when they do, you know, apply for college, you know, or have to take, you know, certain entrance exams, that they typically perform at lower standards. Yeah, which is a shame.
You know, I'm sitting here and all I'm thinking is, you know, there is no balance in this. And, you know, not to suggest the whole world has to just be even keeled, but listening to these statistics is painting a picture that I hope people can really take in what this is painting, because it's telling us the why. We know the who. We've been talking about the who. We've been talking about the what. And now we're really getting a closer look at the why.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So physical health. Racial and ethnic minorities have worse overall health than that of white Americans. So health disparities, they stem from various things, but we've already talked about it. Most of the people don't have access to insurance. Right. And then a lot of times in certain communities, there are those like low-cost clinics, and sometimes they don't always have like the best equipment, and maybe the best, professionals there. A lot of times they depend on high, percentage of like volunteers to help them out in those kind of situations. So, you could just see, Corinne, how, it's just, I think about the statistics that I've seen before where it says, that Black Americans and minorities have like higher risk for certain things like diabetes, heart disease, and other things, stroke, right? High blood pressure. Yeah. And so, it's just like all resonating for me when I look at this, at these statistics and see, it's hard to take care of yourself. And, if you don't even know you have something. And then by the time you do, when it's urgent and an emergency, you do go to the doctor and maybe it's so far gone that it's definitely going to take a toll, and affect your life satisfaction probably for the rest of your life.
Yes, it will do that. And, this is also making me think of, if you have family members that are in this picture that we're painting where the resources are slim, you have not the best care and not the best healthcare options. And then when you do go to get care, because it's not at a certain level, that increases the number of trips you're making to the hospital, because are they getting it right? The things that they're, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying the healthcare industry isn't making mistakes, but when you think about, I'm thinking about the elderly population of gamblers. That's what I'm referring to specifically here. And it's those who, you're dealing with depression and isolation and other things and escape, trying to gamble on the side to, have some type of connection with something that can give you the dopamine. And you go into, you're in this community where you may not have the resources, and now you're going to to seek care. And maybe you're not able to either articulate what's going on with you that they know. And that's, those are more trips, right? Or maybe you are articulating what's going on and maybe you just aren't connected with the right provider. I firsthand have seen these things happen in my family through friends. I know some other people can relate to this. And again, this is more so about just educating you on the pieces of the puzzle that equal this picture.
Right. Right. And I want to mention that most of my information on statistics I found at the American Council on Education. So, Corinne, studies have found an association between problem gambling and poverty. And that sounds like so backwards, huh?
Yeah.
Problem gambling, poverty. Where is the money coming from? What are we missing here?
When I said, it does, that's what I'm saying. This is such a conundrum.
People don't have money to gamble, right?
No.
They're in poverty. Yeah. So how can the rates of disordered gambling be so high in these communities?
But it goes back. It's a circle. It's a loop. It's because of the lack. And, some of the key reasons individuals are impacted by gambling addiction are psychological vulnerabilities and, lack of support systems, cultural and social state. All the things we're talking about are in that loop that bring them right back. It's the financial stresses or strains, wanting to get out of the neighborhood or into a home or something different and just really not seeing a way out. But then there's this opportunity, or what's disguised as an opportunity, called gambling.
Right. Yeah. And so we already know what happens once you get in there, and that once you get in there and you get into that loop and you start chasing losses, I think that is just where it starts. And it's like a hamster wheel, and until that person, unfortunately reaches their rock bottom. And not really sure. That could be different for different people, but, and actually reach out and get treatment and get some help. So, Corinne, in a government organized system where gambling profits are used for common good, because there are some good that's coming out of it. I mean, they're using some of the funds to fund education and other public service and whatnot. But it's really unfortunate that the profits come from the most socially disadvantaged people. And I mean, this is almost just like exacerbating inequality, right? Yeah.
That's like, sometimes when you make these points, I just got to like sit with it.
I know. But some of these things, I mean, they really, really make you think about it. And it's just amazing that it's just the truth. These are facts.
Yeah.
And it's hard to come out of a disorder when you can't see hope. You never get past that basic need, on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You're right there on, the basics, food, water, a place to stay, clothes or whatever, just the basic necessities. I mean, how can you ever see better if you're just every day is a struggle just for the basic necessities? And then if you add gambling in there, oh my goodness, then you're really complicating it, opening yourself up to all kinds of, mental health disorders or gambling disorder. Yeah,
and the whole reason for pursuing to gamble is becoming worse because you're gambling to make it better, but the gambling is taking from you. So it's just deepening the problem.
Yeah. Well, I'm just glad that, that people are becoming more aware and that you and I are here sharing all of this information with our listeners and helping them, guiding them with resources to get help.
Yes.
So with that, I think it's time for me to reveal today's trivia answer.
Please do. Tell me how I did, because you said I was in there, Gwen. I want to know how close.
You were very close. The answer is 37.7.
37 points. I said 35 to 50, didn't I? But 37, wow.
That's almost like middle age.
It's interesting. My mind just went to, let me tell you where my mind went as a woman. It went to the age 30, right? And how socially, stigma-wise for women, when we, enter our 30s, the idea is that we have kids, we have a husband, we have a house, all these things, right? The idea of those things. Right. And then I'm wondering, I'm going to do some research to try to identify, because I don't believe that I don't know. It just depends on that woman's life, really, because I want to know the details on that number, the breakdown on who the 30, who those women are.
Well, I think that when we do have a show and maybe we're focusing more on women and gender, then maybe we can do some research
and absolutely
provide our listeners with additional information on that subject.
I love that so much. So, and now, ladies, this is the age that we would love for you to, if you're having any of the symptoms that you believe may be associated with it, or if you're just a person who gambles, period, I would encourage you to pursue going to that DSM-5 questionnaire and just be curious about where you are, because that's going to help you identify if there is something to be concerned about.
Yes.
So we're going to roll into some homework. Are you ready for homework, Gwen?
Yes.
You don't sound excited for homework, Gwen.
I am. I'm really excited for them to complete this homework assignment, because you know how I am as a clinician.
I know. Listen. Did you do your homework?
That's one of the first things that I usually tell my client when I see them.
Yeah.
We're kind of getting to know each other, trying to develop some rapport. And I'm like, well, as a clinician, I just want to let you know, I like to give homework, because you know what? In sessions, it's true. You can't make all these life-changing changes to your life in session, but you can do it when you get home. So,
exactly.
I mean, it just helps to, things that are worked on during sessions, try to apply them to your life, and start making some of those changes. And then with it being homework, it's just accountability, right?
Yeah. Gwen is being so nice to you all. As a coach, I don't give option. They always say, ask them. If you're going to be coaching with me, you're going to have homework. Now, whether or not you do it, that's always up to you, but I'm always going to give it. And today, our homework for you, we want you to set some goals, because without goals, everything we're talking about is just going to be much more difficult. If you don't have a motivation in your life or something you're working towards or aiming for, or some kind of goal, somewhere you want to be that's not where you are, we want you to develop that for yourself. Think about anywhere between 1 to 3 goals. And I'm going to ask you some questions to help you get to thinking about what those goals could be for you. What would your life look like if you were able to leave gambling behind and focus on the things that matter to you? What are the things that matter to you? Write those things down. What do you feel is missing in your life right now? And how do you think overcoming gambling might help you find that thing? When you think about your best self or the person you want to become, what steps do you think are necessary to get you there? Does that mean you have to give something else up in your life, like a co-occurring disorder or something that may be happening as a result of the gambling? Is it alcohol? Is it hanging out with certain friends that give you that nostalgia of playing the sports games and being associated with it? What is it? How would you feel to achieve one of your most meaningful goals? And what would that success look like for you? These are the thoughts we want feeding in your mind daily so that you can really think about what you want to do. Mm-hmm. When you can find at least one thing that you want to do, all you need from there is an action plan, steps to get there. And if you feel lost, that's what we're here for. We're here to help you put feet on that plan. But you got to start somewhere with a goal. And if you're feeling like you're living in a town that just, there's nothing there but one big casino, that's all the excitement you have, that's the only social activity, maybe a goal should be to save some money so that you can travel somewhere else, a city that does have a life outside of casinos, because there is a life that you're not getting to live, because this is the interrupter that we need to put a fork in it. It's done. So please do your homework this week. Set some goals. And in regards to what you can expect from us next, we have a very exciting episode coming up, Gambling at Adolescence, Understanding the Risks and Solutions.
Addiction doesn't define you, and breaking up with it doesn't have to be a solo mission. Kindbridge Behavioral Health offers safe, non-judgmental support anytime from anywhere. Visit kindbridge.com/appointment and start getting the help you deserve today.